I explored 3 stories that had strange and disturbing coincidences tied to them. Well, in this video, it will be no different. I will take a look at 5 more stories that also have strange and disturbing coincidences tied to them. You will find that the timing in these stories just happened to be very bizarre. Now, here at Minutes of Horror, I do not believe in coincidences, so I do pose the question to you. What happens in these stories? Is it just mere coincidence, or does it happen to be something else? I do want to hear from you, so please do feel free to leave an answer in the comment section below. But not only that, I do want to ask if you can also please like and share this video, as any engagement really does help move these videos along, ultimately growing the channel. With that being said, let's go ahead and begin. The hurricane that would change the course of history. Having been born and raised in New Jersey for over 20 years, I am no stranger to powerful hurricanes. Hurricanes so massive, they can also be felt in New York. A hurricane striking New York could also be felt in New Jersey. Makes a lot of sense given the fact how close the 2 states are together. Over 20 years ago, both New Jersey and New York were bracing for a very powerful hurricane. Some reports had the hurricane as either being a Category 3 or an extreme Category 4, that hurricane being Erin. Make no mistake about it, Hurricane Erin was indeed targeting both New Jersey and New York, with New York taking the brunt of the damages. The cost of the damages were being calculated, and it was estimated to be in the millions of dollars. Hospitals were bracing for thousands of injured, not only injured but also deceased. This hurricane was supposed to be a historic day for New York.
Of cloud cover accompanied by scattered showers. I remember that day very well. I was here at News 12 doing my evening weathercast and showing our viewers satellite images of a very powerful storm, a Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Erin, which was moving on a track that would take it, perhaps the next day, right into the tri-state metropolitan area. Notice also the movement. It's moving toward the northwest, and if it were to keep on moving, it would be heading right toward Long Island and southern New England, but it's not going to do that. But then I pointed out that the cold front that was moving through our area would ultimately push Erin away from the East Coast. Will be turned around and moved to the north and northeast, out of the picture for us as this cold front comes on in and through, and from all intents and purposes just boom, kicks Erin right on out to sea. I was actually happy to tell our viewers that we were going to dodge a major weather bullet, that the hurricane was going to veer away from the eastern seaboard, that September 11th was going to be a beautiful day, blue skies and bright sunshine. In retrospect, maybe it would have been better if we had to deal with the hurricane.
Hurricane Erin was supposed to reach New York and make landfall on 9/11. Had it reached New York, visibility would have almost been zero. There would have been no way anybody could fly a plane in this hurricane. Yet, at very last minute, a cold front came along out of nowhere and brushed Hurricane Erin out to sea, making for bright, beautiful, clear skies for 9/11.
The front moves through, less humid air moves in, and sunshine. You know, if that cold front had been just 24 to 36 hours slower than it was, the weather on 9/11 might have been much different than it turned out to be.
There's no doubt if a hurricane had hit on 9/11, the situation would have been changed.
Bill Corbell is a broadcast meteorologist who began his career as a weather officer in the Air Force and recently retired as a lieutenant colonel. The highlight of his military career was a 2-year stint as a weather forecaster for Air Force One. Corbell, who is a private pilot, believes that if Hurricane Erin had moved into the Northeast on September 11th, it likely would have canceled numerous flights and prevented the terrorists from carrying out their plans.
The hijackers, the terrorists needed certain conditions to fulfill what they wanted to do, and the weather just would not have allowed that if a hurricane had hit New York on that day.
Ironically, the beautifully pristine weather that arrived on the morning of September 11th actually helped the terrorists.
I mean, they needed really good weather, which they got. That cold front just scoured the atmosphere clean. It was as clear as you recall and as blue as we have ever seen around here. So that allowed these modestly competent pilot terrorists to see the targets and do what they had to do.
If it had not been September 11th, it might have been some other date then that the terrorists would have chosen. But one thing that we are certain of, if Hurricane Aaron had continued on its northwesterly course into the northeastern states and the tri-state metropolitan area, the tragic events that have been burned into our collective memories and associated with the date, September 11th, might never have happened.
The commercial that had explained everything. In the early hours of August 13th, 2018 in Frederick, Colorado, American oil field operator Christopher Lee Watts ended the life of not only his pregnant wife Shanann, but also their two children, Bella and Celeste. Prior to his interrogation and ultimately his arrest, Christopher Watts rushed home not only to be greeted by a neighbor, but also the police. What Chris Watts did not know is that his neighbor had a video camera that monitored the neighborhood, which includes the Watts home. Upon seeing this video footage, Chris became very agitated. He began fidgeting, moving around, sweating. He was not acting his normal self according to the same neighbor. But even though he was acting very suspicious, nobody knew that Chris was actually the suspect. He was still holding on to his lies. But pay close attention to what plays on the TV, the commercial that appears directly after the neighbor stops playing the video footage.
Diesel. You're good. But yeah, I thought nothing.
Nothing for the rest of the day.
No, that's it.
She's pregnant as well.
How far along?
14, 15 weeks.
Did you happen to catch that? Chris stops and stares at the TV that shows a baby in its mother's womb that reminds him that his wife was pregnant. But as he begins to turn around, you can see the commercial play out. In the commercial, you can see a person buried in an oil field. The oil starts to slowly engulf this person where the only thing that's left is their skull. Two hands come out of the ground and reach for the skull. Then the TV quickly shifts right back to the outside camera. So then, what is the significance behind this very bizarre commercial that to this day I still cannot find any information on? I would like to clarify that I found more information about this commercial after I made this video. This is a quick edit so I can say that this commercial belongs to the TV series American Horror Story. This was a hourglass teaser for its season 8 Apocalypse. And I have to say, the song in the commercial is just as eerie as the visuals itself as it relates to the Chris Watts case. Now, I can't play the song due to copyright strikes, but I will leave a link to the commercial in the comment section below. Just 2 days later, on August 16th, 2018, Shanann Watts and her two daughters would be found at an oil field where Chris Watts worked. Shanann buried in a shallow grave while both of their daughters were placed inside of crude oil tanks. A body shown on TV being buried in an oil field, while at the same time hands are coming out of crude oil to grab onto a skull, a commercial that playing at the exact same time when Chris realizes his cover is blown thanks to this neighbor's video camera. This is just so strange. This is such a coincidence that I don't even think I can call this a coincidence. Let's just call this for what it is. It looked like at that moment someone or something was trying to speak out. That just happens to be so astronomically rare. Now, on November 19th, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving 5 life sentences. Watts is currently being held in a Wisconsin prison. Seemingly, after the crime had taken place, there had been a lot of paranormal events taking place inside the Watts home. A lot of these events, voices, and things being seen were captured by the police themselves investigating the home. For example, you can hear 2 investigators become very confused when they hear a little girl giggle.
So there's plenty of first into the field.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What in the world was that? Wow. Go in there and step on that little blue thing and see if that's where that noise came.
Yeah, it sounded like a kid toy.
It might. It sort of sounded like it.
Something I heard it.
Did you hear it?
I did.
Sounded like a kid giggling or something, didn't it? Or a kid.
It did.
Where did that come from? Because all he did was go straight in there. That was strange, but we're making note of that.
I heard it. I definitely heard the same thing you did.
Yeah, and then he just sort of turned around and looked. But I didn't expect that the register. Was she on anything? Oh no, she was pregnant.
A book about the Maui fires prior to the Maui fires. On August 8th, 2023, massive fires had overtaken Lahaina, Maui. Now, the official narrative as to what happened in Lahaina, Maui happens to be that high winds and dry weather caused the wildfires to develop. Basically, climate change. I just happen to be very hard pressed to find anybody that believes the official narrative. If they do, I am sure they are few and far between. There has been many suspicious things to have come out, many suspicious things that have come to light ever since those fires. Well, for one, there is the Healy My 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan, which is basically an instruction manual to turn Maui into a smart city. Then we have on camera police blocking exits, blocking people from trying to escape, turning them right back around into the fires.
Videos shot by Travis Miller shortly after he goes in and out of Safeway at 3 p.m. show northbound lanes then shut down. This video shows no cars on the blocked-off highway still, 5:24 p.m., 2.5 hours later, when Debbie Schultz-Peterson shot this video. Miller's video documented the lane closure during that time. He says police directed traffic down Keawe Street into the cannery.
And either went out the backside on the front street. I could see that everyone was blocked, so I went out and I came this way, and I got under the power line.
Though we are not crossing the barricade, we're told we cannot film here.
You go somewhere else, but you guys not allowed here.
Waters have been shut off, stopping people from combating the fires. All 80 sirens were not working. Then there is the subject of possibly over 1,000 children still missing since the day of the fires. So basically, we can go on and on and on when it comes to all the suspicious events that circled around the Maui fires. But I want to look at a very suspicious book that was published on Amazon only 2 days after the fires had taken place. A book written by an author named Milestone, or Milestones, titled Fire and Fury, the story of the 2023 Maui fire and its implications for climate change. A brief description of the book reads, Fire and Fury, the story of the Maui fire and its implications for climate change is a gripping and eye-opening account of one of the most devastating wildfires in Hawaii's history, and how it reveals the urgent need to address the global climate crisis. The book chronicles the events of August 8th through August 11th, 2023, when a massive fire swept across the island of Maui, fueled by drought, heat, and hurricane winds. The book describes the harrowing experiences of the people who lived through the fire, as well as the heroic efforts of the firefighters and rescuers who battled the flames. Now, as you can see, this book is pushing the climate change narrative, but that's not the biggest problem here. The biggest problem is that this book was published by Amazon on August 10th, 2023. This book had been published by Amazon only 2 days after the fires had taken place. Matter of fact, while this book was available for purchase, the fires were still raging on. This book also recounts the events of August 11th, a date that had not happened yet as this book was being published. For most people, this book was enough proof that the fires that had taken place in Lahaina, Maui were indeed intentional. People all over social media were talking about this book, so eventually the fact checkers, they had to be called in. PolitiFact, they run an article titled, A Book Published August 10th About the Maui Wildfires is proof the wildfires were planned. This would be PolitiFact's statement about the book.
Social media users are basically claiming that a book about the Maui wildfires that was published only 2 days after the fire started is proof that the fires were planned.
They came out with a book, Fire and Fury, the story of the 2023 Maui fire. It was 100% a plan. They wanted the land in Maui, and now they got it.
The timing of the book's publication is not proof that the fires were planned. The book's online summary and introduction appear to be drawn from publicly available information reported by news outlets in Maui County. The author's name appears to be a pseudonym, Dr. Milestones, and the Amazon author bio reads, "I'd rather not say." About 15 other books under the same pseudonym were published within a 3-month period. This has led to speculation that the book might have been produced using artificial intelligence, which draws from information already available online. The Maui book is not on Amazon anymore. We rate this claim false.
PolitiFact had determined that this was simply AI pulling from different algorithms from different media sources, putting together a digital book and sending this digital book over to Amazon. But there was only 2 problems with this theory. Well, for one, the most important part that PolitiFact happens to leave out happens to be the fact that this was not a digital book. This was a paperback book. It takes Amazon anywhere from 3 business days to 10 business days to publish a paperback book. So they want us to believe that this paperback book was created, sent off to Amazon, and published within the span of 2 days. There is also the simple fact that at that time, the most popular AI program was ChatGPT. ChatGPT, when you would put in the Maui fires 2023, as the Maui fires were raging on, ChatGPT could not recognize the Maui fires because at that time, ChatGPT was not powerful enough to recognize current events. The excuse that AI had created this book just does not seem plausible. So then, what's going on here? Was the timing that this book was published just a mere coincidence? This book was published as fast as possible by Amazon? Or is this proof that something sinister did indeed take place with Maui, and they were trying to push out this climate change narrative as fast as they could? The strange Chinese text messages. In the early morning hours of February 22nd, 2024, those who had AT&T as their phone carrier, among others, were unfortunately greeted with an outage. Many people across the United States had lost all voice and mobile data service, with some of those impacted unable to reach 911 emergency services. But it just wasn't AT&T. Verizon and T-Mobile users were also affected. Businesses outside of phone carriers were also affected, so were pharmacies. There were many theories as to what had happened, anywhere from a cyber attack, the solar flares, right down to AT&T saying that it was an employee error. Now, those who had AT&T and other phone carriers that were affected had no service whatsoever, but there was a small minority of people that were receiving bizarre and strange text messages. These text messages were in a different language, which was eventually determined to be Chinese. There were people in the comment section of my videos telling me they were receiving these text messages. There were people on Reddit saying they were receiving these bizarre text messages. So people took what was in these text messages and ran them through AI translating software. Multiple different types of translating software, they were getting different results. But there was a commonality. There was one word that always stood out, and that one word happened to be bridge. For instance, there was one translation that read, "Consider the bridge's magnetism ground, and you will be alone in the bridge," calling for an alliance, weeping, knocking on the wall, looking forward to expanding, knocking on the dust, Zyojin bastard. Another had read, "The bridge is made of magnetic material and the bridge is made of wood." Google had translated the text message as, "Consider the bridge. Cheshi wins the prisoner and sends the prisoner via iron oxygen canal." But Apple would have the eeriest translation of all. "Don't worry about the bridge. repeatedly saying, criticize the bridge, and then over and over again saying, the bridge, the bridge, the bridge. So again, no matter how it was translated, there was a clear focus on a bridge. Now, as time had progressed, there have been multiple incidences involving bridges in the United States. Many people had taken these text messages as some kind of warning or some kind of prophetic message. What many people may not know is that as these people were receiving these strange and bizarre text messages on February 22nd, that same day, only hours later, there was a major bridge collapse in China. On February 22nd, 5 people had lost their lives after a barge hits bridge near China's Guangzhou, plunging vehicles in the water. This barge striking this bridge would actually be the first in a series of strange events where barges were striking bridges. A month later, a barge would strike the Francis Scott Key Bridge, bringing the entire bridge down. Images on state-owned China Central Television showed an empty container barge lodged between 2 columns of the bridge, with part of the bridge's 2-lane road deck missing. All road traffic on the bridge was halted. 4 vehicles and an electric motorbike fell off the bridge. 2 vehicles, which included a bus, plunged into the water, and 3 other vehicles ended up on the barge. CCTV said the bus was only carrying its driver. China does not know what caused this barge to strike this bridge, but like I said, this would be eerily similar to the events that had taken place across the United States. Were these text messages just a mere coincidence, or was this some kind of warning, or perhaps something else? The strange premonition. In a bedroom in a townhouse near Amsterdam, Miguel Panduinata reached out for his mother saying, "Mama, may I hug you?" His mother, Samira, wrapped her arms around her 11-year-old son, who had been oddly agitated for days, peppering her with questions about death, about his soul, about God. For days, Miguel was not acting like his normal cheerful self. His mother, Samira, had no idea why. He had a big trip coming up to visit his grandmother, so he should be very excited. The next morning, she would drop Miguel and his big brother Shaka at the airport so they could catch their flight and start their journey to Bali to visit their grandmother. Miguel's silver suitcase sat in the living room ready to go. Jet skiing and surfing in paradise awaited, but still something was very off. A day earlier, while playing soccer, Miguel had burst out, "How would you choose to die? What would happen to my body if I was buried? Would I not feel anything because our souls go back to God?" The night before Miguel's big trip, Miguel refused to release his mother from his grasp. The very next day, Samira had taken her boys to the airport, and finally they were outside customs. The boys, Shaka and Miguel, hugged Samira goodbye and walked toward passport control. This is when suddenly Miguel whirled around and ran back, throwing his arms around his mother. Miguel saying to his mother, "Mama, I'm gonna miss you. What will happen if the airplane crashes?" Now, Miguel has flown before, so Samira was wondering what this was all about. So she says to Miguel, "Don't say that," while squeezing him. "Everything will be okay."
I mean, the eerie thing was that right before getting on the flight, after going through passport control, he ran back to his mom, my sister, who was standing next to me, and he said, "You know, what's going to happen if the plane is going to crash and I'm going to die? I'm afraid to fly." And she said, "Don't worry, you've flown so many times before on your own. You've been unaccompanied minor on many flights before. You'll be safe. Your big brother is there. Everything's going to be fine." And he said, "You know, what's going to happen if I die? And what if God asked me a question? What should I tell him?" And so
Samira reassured her sons that everything was going to be okay. As they walked off, Samira noticed that Miguel kept looking back at her. She noticed that he had a very sad look in his eyes, but eventually he would vanish from view. Samira started to feel strange. She started to feel nervous, but she eventually reassured herself that everything was going to be okay. And for Shaka and Miguel and 296 other passengers, everything was okay. Everything had been okay for 2 hours of their 12-hour flight. You see, the flight that the boys boarded and the flight that these passengers were on just happened to be MH17. Samira just finished buying clothes for Shaka when her phone rang. She picks up her phone and it's her friend on the other end yelling, "Where are you? The plane crashed." Samira made it home just in time to faint. Everyone aboard MH17, passengers and crew members alike, instantly lost their lives. To this day, Samira grapples with the what ifs and the astronomical odds how McGill knew something was wrong, asking her questions about death and what would happen if the plane would crash. Wondering what would have happened if she had paid closer attention to what McGill was feeling. So the question just happens to be, did McGill, someone who has flown before, just have last minute jitters that came out of nowhere? Did he have some kind of premonition? Or was this just a bizarre coincidence? Again, when it comes to all 5 of these stories, I do want to hear from you, so please do comment in the comment section below. In any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, because once again, any engagement does help the channel grow. Thank you so much for your support.